while we've got people joining, everyone who's coming in, say hi in the comments or in the chat. Let us know whereabouts you're watching in from. It should be a good session today. We've got lots of interesting demonstrations coming up. And just to give some context about this this Showcase Your Craft event, I am very lucky that I get to see so many different types of craft on a really regular basis. I chat with a lot of you guys in person, and I get to see loads of cool things going on. And this is really a chance to express that and show that to the wider world, and to get some inspiration out there for how you can use craft. What we'll do then, I think, if we get JF Marston, you've recently come back from your Italy trip. Do you want to get us kicked off by presenting what your travel diary, essentially your photo diary, which you made during your trip to Italy?
Okay, thanks. Yes, this summer I went to Italy for a 3-week vacation. It was the first vacation since the beginning of COVID-19. So I was very anxious to visit Europe. It was my second trip to Europe, in Italy actually, and we tend to take a lot. I mean, I'm a photographer, amateur photographer, so I like to take a lot of pictures. And usually with this kind of trips, I'm taking between 1,000 and 2,000 pictures. And when I come back home, I kind of upload that to Adobe and start processing that in the weeks after the trip, the vacation ended. But this time I wanted to try to use craft as a way to share my my trip adventure, if I may say this like that. And I use services like SmugMug or Glass, two web services which are pretty well known. But this time I wanted to build something different. And since I'm a big fan of craft, I love the application, and it's one of its strengths to be able to build beautiful documents and being able to, I mean, the friction to publish from craft is you share a document, everything you put out there is already available to the world. So it's pretty tempting to try the experience of building a kind of a photo diary along the way. And the other reason is I think it's mandatory to try that, and after that you can make features requests. I mean, craft is great, but there is things that needs to be improved, or better support for those who wants to use the software in a photographic world. So that's the whole idea of building the diary. So I can share the craft environment, which I'll explain the design details I went through. There is a few things I want to talk about. So if you see my screen, everyone see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to give a look as a kind of a journal to the document. So I used the pretty basic feature of craft to build to give a cover image to each pages of the website, and to use a background only for the main page, but on each day I kind of use a pretty standard white background. And so there's an introduction, what the project is all about. And then so you see the exact itinerary I went through during this trip. So I use Apple Maps to generate the maps there. And also, so the idea was to build on each day was to, at the end of the day, to kind of upload the picture from the main camera and the iPhone, and select the best one the morning after, and start writing a few things to kind of explain what we did that day and put some context around the picture. So that's why I'm not a travel blogger or anything like that. So there is not much text in the document on the website. I made the minimum so I could kind of explain what we did and where we went. And also the use of the cards format, the one that are looking like that instead of using there's a few I could have used, like this one or this one. I wanted to use the horizontal one in order to be able to kind of show that there is some text that is written in the document. And the other thing I try to do is to match the main color tone of the picture with the background of the card. So to have some kind of visual consistency there, and so depending on the day, you'll see that there's some kind of relationship between the picture and the card background. And for that, craft is excellent. I love the way we can format those things. And the funny thing is, I shared this website to a few of my friends and colleagues at work, and they think I spent kind of months to build that thing, and it's so easy to build that. I said, no, it's pretty easy. It's just write the thing in the document. You put your picture there. You kind of do some arrangement, and then the website is kind of updated directly. So they were kind of amused by that. They were not sure how I couldn't make that so fast. So for that, craft is very powerful tool. So so when you hit the page for a specific date, and there's a few information on that page and a few pictures. And the thing I wanted to do is to be able to navigate within the website without with less friction as possible. So at the end of the page, you could just hit the next day button there, and then go to the next day, and then so you can follow kind of a story. So I did that for all the days until the end of the trip. So that's pretty much how I did the thing. And at the end of the trip, so I ended up having all those days. I've been there for 3 weeks. And then, so at the end of the photo diary, there's a guest book where people can just drop a comment just to say hi, or if they have any recommendation to do regarding places where I could have been in Italy. And then at the end of it, it's there's a few more detailed explanation of kind of a behind the scene look at why I did that, what were the purpose, how I did my publishing. So a lot of information to kind of explain what it is all about. And so that's pretty much the concept behind the photo diary. So I made a video on my YouTube channel about that, and I put out some concluding remarks about the viability of craft as a tool for photographer. So feel free to, I think you will share the bookmark to this video. So I'm pretty excited with the tool itself. Sure, there is a few limitations related to how you can arrange. If I go down in a specific day, and then there is a few limitation on how you can build the photo arrangement. And the way people will browse the website, depending on what you wrote on the document, will influence how they can kind of skip to the next photo or to the previous one. So that's the kind of detail I'm explaining in the video. So that's pretty much it I wanted to say about. I don't know if you have any question or comments about that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like, thank you so much for that. It's I love both how it looks. And like you said, your friends are probably really interested in just how easily you made this. And it's really visually beautiful. But I also love, I see you doing this a lot, that you're kind of doing experiments and also narrating those experiences. It's very meta. You're trying stuff out and then narrating that too, to kind of show your thought process. And I think that's really, really cool as well, like that you do that process.
So in the morning, I used to kind of gather all the picture I wanted to put out there, and so I did a few image processing on the iPad before uploading the picture before putting them in the document, and then I wrote some text. It's pretty much very basic stuff. I wanted to keep that to the minimum because I mean I wanted to stay all. We didn't want to stay all day at the apartment to do that, so we wanted to go out and visit places. So I did the minimum for each day, but I think it was the picture that were reflecting the best the places or the kind of the visual highlights of the day. So that's what I did.
Cool. And anyone listening, and if you got any questions before we change speaker, put them in the chat now or in the Q&A now. How long do you think each day you spent taking these things, writing a little description and everything?
I think if I for a specific day, I would say between an hour and 2 hours. Like half an hour in the evening to upload the pictures and create the basic page where I'll put the picture for the next morning. So if I put that all together, I would say between an hour and 2 hours each day.
Awesome.
And it's also fascinating because since I'm using the business plan, there's some analytics there, which is interesting to see because as we get further in time, people's interest is kind of dropping, and even during the trip, I saw a lot of people coming see the pages in the beginning, but near the end of the trip, I don't know if it says something about the project quality, but people were less kind of interested to look at this. It's a challenge because we have to compete against people's spending a lot of time on Facebook and stuff like that. But I didn't want to put that on Facebook or Instagram. So yeah.
Cool. Any other questions for JF before we switch? All right. I think that's it. So thanks so much for presenting. I know you've inspired me for my next trip. So, and one last shout out to you as well. I think you were the one who pioneered the guest book down the bottom, and I love that. And I think I definitely want to use that in future as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. Next, I'll bring you on screen next, Martin, if that's all right, and you can share what you wanted to present.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Let me just find my way around here. Okay. So you should be able to see my craft screen now.
Yes.
Okay, great. So you asked about my YouTube stuff, but I thought I'd also share how I use craft for daily notes and journaling and keeping track of what I'm doing. And a few other things. So I've saved some things here. So let me just take a look. So when I do a project, a lot of my stuff is kind of transient. It's temporary while I'm working on a project, and then I'll get rid of it. And I haven't spent too much time prettifying any of this. The other day, I sort of put a nice blue gradient background on a daily note. I thought, well, that looks nice, but it only applies to that one note, that one daily note. I can't be bothered to do that every day. So it's quite vanilla in terms of how it appears. But when I'm doing a YouTube video, and this, I've got a template. It's very like JF's. I've seen him talk about that on his YouTube channel. Lots of checklists. Some of it is redundant now because I'm changing what I do, but this would be a decent example anyway. So what I do is I'll create a page. Here we've got a demo project, and the notes and the script I keep in an IA writer document, and just I link to that. So this is just some lorem ipsum text, and what I do is I copy the URL path to the file, and I just paste it in Craft as a link, and then I use this page in Craft for thoughts, that stuff I might want to include, or links to things and stuff like that. I did try putting my scripts into Craft, but on my iMac, for me, this, even at the large font size, it's just too small. And I also like having just a plain text document when I finish the whole thing that's just in a folder. I use this document for the script and notes, and I'll duplicate it and I'll use it to create closed captions in ScreenFlow, and then I can export from ScreenFlow. So I've got an SRT file, and then it's got a project folder at the end of it all. So yeah, and what I'll do is I'll just add things, thoughts that come along. So that's how of the checklist. I've used templates. I put a template in. So from templates, so here we are. So this is a link to just YouTube and ScreenFlow notes I've collected that if I want to look at those, you know, just things. A lot of it is temporary. I might not look at it again, to be honest, but it's really handy to have it. That's obviously redundant. But yeah, and like I say, as you can tell, I haven't spent a lot of time making this look nice. It's like just get it in there and let's get on with the stuff. This is my sort of basic checklist thing, or it was, for when I was doing it a certain way, because the channel originally, it was just whiteboard animations. So I would write it, edit it, rehearse it, record the audio, and then do an animation to go under or over the audio. Now I'm integrating a bit of talking head with whiteboard. So this the first couple of parts of the process are changed. But it's important to remember to, you know, just leave a bit of space for the closed captions. You don't want your animation to be covered up by captions for people who are hard of hearing or something like that, or just watching in silence. And then these are sort of notes for when I'm in the final stage of the process. So I'll just talk about my daily note as well. How am I going to find that? Let's do one to today anyway. Okay, template, it's got my daily note template. This is my basic daily note template, and I've kind of gone through this process of distillation. Of using this for a few weeks now. So this was an idea that came from a podcast I heard, Chris Bailey, and he's, one of the things he does is, what 3 things do I want to accomplish today? And this is like a nice little thing. I use a notebook, a paper notebook, for my sort of keeping track of what I want to do. And sometimes the things I want to accomplish just echo that, but it's nice just to have them there and look back at the end of the day. Unless whether a review comes in, you know, did I do it? What energized me? What drained me? They're things I got from, there's a guy called Struthless who's got a YouTube channel. And these are useful things to look back on at the end of the day. And then there's morning questions. What am I grateful for this morning? What is my highlight for the day? That's another book. I can't remember what it was called now. It's a couple of Australian guys. But that should be something that's like takes an hour or 45 minutes, and it's your highlight for the day. So my highlight for the day is this session. Nice one. But these daily notes are handy to look back on. I've got one for Friday, which is slightly different. Oh, interstitial notes. They're really useful. I got a reminder to look back at those at the end of the day, because they're really useful when I think to do them. Because we do things and we forget. So like today, I've decided to stop using one piece of software and start using another. So what I do is I'll type now, and it'll put the time in, and I can make my note, and then I'll go back and I'll format that as code, so it just stands out. There's a weird thing that happens with 11 a.m. I don't know why. It always puts a date in. It wants to put September in, never the time. I don't know why. But they're really useful to look back on. At the end of the week, I'll do a slightly different note for Friday. Friday note. So this is like a weekly review. How was this week? I look back across the daily notes, and it's really interesting to see just how much I've done very often, and decisions I've made and things like that. So the other things I've done are I've got a work page and a CV. So the CV is something I put it on my LinkedIn profile as a link at the top, so people can come to this and just have a look at it. And I really like the way it uses all of Craft's features, the cards and the drop downs, and it's, you know, lots of space and stuff like that. Nice picture, contact details. The work page is similar but slightly different in that I wanted this to link from my website. So I don't want my CV on there necessarily. I just want to link to a page that tells people more about my work. So it's a very similar information presented in a slightly different way. Again, sort of drop downs, but it's just a link to a nice page. Demo project, yeah, we've done that. I guess this is a newsletter, so I started sending out a video newsletter. So this is a YouTube thing for subscribers. So I just make some notes and talk to the camera, and then when I've done it, I'll post the link there, so I can just go to that newsletter if I want to, and that's a record of it. I also use Craft for, it's not in this space, but I'm doing some workshops in Leominster, which is in Herefordshire. So what I'm doing with that is I'm collecting resources like exercises and receipts, how far I've travelled, parking and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the project, and when I'm done with it, I'll get rid of it. There was one other thing that I was going to show you as well. Oh yeah, this right. So I edit some books. So let's just get the new documents. Okay. Insert the template. So this is the book editing template. So this basically is the author of the book, what the book's called, the writer's email address, and the deadline, the ultimate deadline. And these are some things I know I have to do at some point. Like all the chapters have got to be alphabetized, we've got to cross-link relevant ones. So make sure the queries are taken out, and then I export it to Word, so I can deliver it. Change all the quotes in Word, because sometimes they can be straight. I'll get text from writers in different formats. They can be dumb quotes rather than smart quotes, and I only trust Word to do it right. Then I'll do a spell check, make some notes, and what I'm also going to do is, with the one I'm going to do now is submit queries to the writer, because sometimes they won't go into enough detail or there'll be stuff missing. So I'm going to share a document from Craft and say, look, just double click and you can add a comment that tells me what I need to know, and I can add it to the document. Okay, and here we've got some links to like some, you know, things I might need to reference as part of the process. I think that there was one other thing as well, but I can't see it here now. All documents. Let's try that. So yeah, this is a Kanban board I created, so I can just, it's kind of vertical, but I can just, as things go from one part to the next, I can just drag them up, you know, as they go through the process. and I'm also a mentor to do some work with the Royal Literary Fund, which puts writers into universities. So I'm mentoring some people at the moment. So this is a page I've got in Craft. So this is the writer's details, just the basic information there. Here I just list all their email addresses. So Apple Mail can kind of confuse me sometimes. So if I want to email them all, I can just copy that, paste it into the CC field, and just send them all an email. And this is a little table which is just handy for reference. Where they are, who they are, where they are, when I'm going to see them at the university, and where we're going to have lunch. And that's just a nice reference. And I would have done this stuff in Apple Notes. I did it for a long time. This is just handier, and it's a really nice feature that I don't know whether it's new, but I can reorder these now in Craft, so I can make sure that it just works for me, that they're in chronological order, so I know who I'm going to see first. So I think that's about it.
Awesome, thank you. That was I love, yeah, like the little insight into how you're using Craft. And I love the reminder. I always forget that now exists. You know, the little now command. I always forget that exists.
I found that by accident.
It's a good reminder, because I often want to do the same, and I always forget that exists. That's a fantastic reminder as well. I want to give anyone a chance listening in. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff you just covered. Anyone listening in, do you have any questions you want to give to Martin? I would like to come to your journal, or your daily journal, if you like, daily note.
Yeah.
Is this primarily for, I know you do the review on a Friday, is this primarily for like work life stuff? Does it incorporate some of your personal life? And how do you find that balance? Because I know that's something I struggle with, is I do these weekly reviews as well, and typically mine are very much both personal and work related, if you like. And it's kind of, how do you kind of incorporate those things in your kind of life, in your reviews?
My what 3 things I want to accomplish today are always work related. My morning questions are very often personal. My review is always work related. And very often what drained me is always in the summer. It's always like, it's too hot in here, I can't think. I do morning pages as well. There's a video on that about on my YouTube channel about that, which is a brain dump. I haven't got the book here, but that feeds into the work. What I do online, and I'm a big proponent of handwriting stuff in books. It's a very different process. With whatever way we do it, typing is repetitive. We're just hitting keys. We're not actually forming the letters, which it's slower and it's very different. We have to actually process the information in a different way. I look back on the week. I find the interstitial notes, like I said, when I remember to do them, really interesting. I've got a reminder in Apple Reminders just to look back on them at 6 o'clock. It's set to every evening, and that can be interesting. You know, we make these records, and the level to which they're reflected upon is personal, and the level to which they're used is individual to each of us. I think it's important to have just in case, because we can forget. One of the things I do quite a lot is link things, like with dates. I'll use the @ because I like Craft's recognizes relative dates, so I can put tomorrow @ tomorrow, and it'll recognize in a few weeks' time. It'll recognize what date that was, and I don't do it, but if ever I want to, I can connect. I can move between those notes.
Yeah,
and just see what I was thinking.
Yeah, I do that especially for some to-dos as well. Like if I've got some certain things to do this week, I might tag that particular day. So on that day, it's in the daily note. So yeah, no, definitely, that's very useful. Cool, that's it, I think. So thanks so much for presenting that. There were no more quick questions in chat. So I'll hand things over to Dave. I believe, Dave, you've got some of your PKM set up you want to show. So yeah, over to you, Dave.
Okay, see my screen okay?
Yes.
So you were asking me, Tom, to cover atomic notes and then the focus driver framework. And instead of kind of trying to do a really long explanation, I thought it'd be interesting to actually make atomic notes from what you asked me to do. So I just wanted to give a kind of quick insight into my process. And what I have here is from this week, kind of brain dumping and thinking about stuff. I have 4 potential atomic notes just out of explaining today what are the benefits, how do you create them, how do I share them. One of the things that people often ask is how do you surface them so quickly? So what I done is I just start everything with what my intention is. And my intention is to show people second brain, to reduce the quest for perfection, and be happy with that organic evolution. So for me, what's really important with atomic notes is they're not, people see them as a kind of shortcut to building long form content. And I see that as only one use. I see that they are shareable in a succinct way as a one-off note, or they can become social media posts or threads, or they can go into emails or anything else you want with them. But for me, the key is the atomic notes first are created for me, to help me. And they're not created in that kind of marketing salesy way to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to convince somebody I'm an expert on something. I write for my future self. So everything is you and your, but that makes it much more shareable as well. So I'm speaking to you when I share that content rather than having to edit that content as well. And what I done then is after I kind of figured out the intention, what I do is anything, whether it be creating atomic notes or writing blogs or anything, is I source stuff by the least amount of effort to the most amount of effort. So I source by atomic notes, by snippets of stuff that I already have, and then by external sources. So in here, these are already atomic notes that I already have. And these are kind of cues for me to say, okay, what have I already thought about? What have I spent lots of time backwards and forwards already rather than trying to come up with something on the fly or sitting with a blank page? So they really give me some cues about what I actually wanted to say. They then become kind of, down here becomes my random scribbles to begin with. And then as I get that in a more succinct way, that then gets grouped in using crafts groups here to be individual pages so that I can explain each one of them. And then I can forget about this. But if I didn't find enough content in my atomics notes that were already there, I would then look through snippets. So, here I don't feel my second brain has ever completed or organized. It's random and erratic, so it's okay not being perfect. Mindsets, when I talk about focus drivers in a minute, I have something in there again to trigger what I want to chat about. But this is incompleted work. This is not an atomic note. This is kind of a paragraph. And maybe what could happen is some of those paragraphs could combine together to create an atomic note from what I wanted to say today. And if I don't have snippets of information, I look to external sources. So I look at, are there other people already speaking about something that I don't know about? And then I may go off and research it and help me. And what's really good is answering other people's questions. That for me is one of the really helpful things with atomic notes is it's just one point. Oh, I have an opinion on that. I have a viewpoint on that. Let me just share it. And whether it be an image through, craft export and share it on social media, or it just be a straightforward craft link, it does the job. And here's somebody who asked a lot of questions of me before about my second brand. And all I done was I took all of their bullet points, which were tag list, tag hierarchy, how do you find content and pull it in? And I just put in some replies. But I went through this in the same way that I go through sources. So I was like, do I have any atomic notes that already answer these questions? Can I already address them? And then I could send back 5 different links to somebody, or I could take them all together and put it into something more succinct as well. So it makes it a lot easier. For me, one of the biggest benefits is when you hover over the document in Craft, the fact that you can see that document preview, that helps me see the difference between something being an atomic note, where I have the atomic note tag at the top, so it pops up really easily. Whereas just a random document, I can see it doesn't have an atomic note. So I know that may be something that's incomplete. So there's a bit of effort and work. I may have to go back into that and polish it, and then it may become an atomic note. But if I'm just trying to give you some information we're on an online course, I'm just talking to somebody and I just want to get information, I know just from that preview, I can give them that information. That's already succinct and efficient for me. And then on kind of creating atomic notes in Craft, there's a few things that I do when I'm creating notes. First, I don't go into it with the goal of creating atomic notes. I go into it with the goal of just creating notes, creating stuff that are generally already actionable, already based around something I'm doing. So whether it be for doing today, what we're talking about today, I created atomic notes, but that just is because I already had a deliverable. If I'm working on a project, I have a reflect and learn note for every project I work with a client on. And they may come back and say, that was really useful, what you done the other day. That may become something, I'll just make a note of that. And over time, that could evolve into an atomic note, which then could be part of a marketing document to say, well, these are the kind of things you can expect when you come to us as well. And then, you know, again, I'm more than happy to share these links afterwards, that I have all of these kind of, you know, this is the beauty of having atomic notes. While I'm talking, I have an entire document with kind of step-by-step of how to source by the least amount of effort to the highest amount of effort. But I don't need to remember any of that sort of stuff. I just remember my words. And atomic notes for me, that's what's really helpful, is using your own words rather than what you think other people want to hear. Using your own words, because in one sense, Craft search is a little bit limited, that you can't kind of filter search as you go. It's really important to have your own words to say, how would I phrase this? Because when it comes back in a year's time and you want to answer this question, would you say this person was a developer, or would you say they were an engineer? So that when you go and type a search, it's way, way easier. But also what I've kind of learned when it comes to actually kind of structuring atomic notes is that declarative titles are really, really useful. And what I mean by that is stating some sort of conclusion rather than how do I do A, B, and C. You could actually explain the outcome of doing A, B, and C. But kind of if you start with just questions, what will happen is when you go to search and you go how to, you're going to find 100 how-to documents rather than the benefits. So for me, you know, structuring an atomic note, that for me is quite succinct, because you know already before you go into the document what the outcome of that is going to be. And likewise, if somebody came back to me and said, how would I structure an atomic note? Well, I already kind of have an inkling of what I'm going to type into search to find this and resurface this. And I think for me, I don't like the idea that a second brain is a storage, it's a silo so that you never forget anything. My second brain is more to have backwards and forwards, to spark curiosity, to help me go further rather than, you know, to put it in there and to forget about it again. And by using my words, when I go to search, I'm talking to myself. I'm saying, have you already answered this question? Or do you already have an opinion on this? So it's way, way easier for me. And I mean, atomic notes are really, really, really simple. For me, there's a title. And then the second most important thing is to put a tag in, to tag them as atomic notes at the top so that it comes up in a preview in Craft. Then what I found really useful is to have a See Also section. And the See Also section is so that you can kind of explore a little bit further, go down the rabbit hole that little bit more. And I know we have, let's say, you know, there's an atomic writing strategy. I could put that in. And what I would do then is I would use Craft's block so that it stands out and it's clearly independent to the actual content, but it allows me to go further down the rabbit hole. In general, on the See Also, I would try where possible to only use atomic notes down here, because I don't want to use stuff. Everything else, as far as I'm concerned, is temporary. Kind of like Martin said, when he's doing scripts and coming up with ideas, he can put them in and then he can get rid of them. And that's the way I view most of the content. If I'm doing some training, I'm taking notes, I could have, you know, 1,000 words of notes that I took. But if I got one atomic note out of that was 200 words, I don't care if I delete the 1,000 words. That's only temporary to lead me to some conclusion, some eureka moment, or some actual opinion or perspective that I have on something as well. And then likewise, I have a reference. which is for kind of, citations and book quotations and stuff like that as well. That again, I just do that slightly differently. I use the craft quotes to showcase that. And I also then minimize the size of the text because it's somebody else's words. So visually, when I go in here, what I want is I'm looking to really quickly and easily just go, okay, that's, if I need that as a reference point or I want to read into that more, I can, but I'm only focused on my words. And it makes it easy also to share snippets within a note. If I only found one paragraph or 2 bullet points that's relevant, I can grab them without worrying about, am I grabbing somebody else's words or speaking for somebody else as well. And then the last section that I put in, again, these sections are optional. I'm not kind of diligent in saying I must have these, but what they do is they spark that kind of connection again. Does this relate to a book I've already read? Does this relate to a note I've already created? And then likewise, the Genesis is really useful for kind of linking it in with daily notes or linking it in with course notes or training notes, because they're not as succinct as, say, a book highlight. You just grab it, you paste it, you put the author in. But if me and somebody had a conversation, something might spark curiosity, and it allows me to put that in and say, I had a chat, with Tom on whatever it may be, perfectionism or something like that. And that allows me then to reference that. When I come back to this note, it puts me back into that moment as well. So I know where I was, what my perspective was, and it nearly sparks those neurons again, that it's not just this note here. It's, oh yeah, we also talked about this, or we also talked about this. I'm now going to search for whatever else it may be. I know I wrote lots of notes that day, or I know I only wrote one note that day. So it makes things a little bit easier as well. And then sharing atomic notes. For me, having your own words makes it really easy, so I can just go back and I can grab what I need really, really quickly. What I love about Craft is the sharing option of images, and the fact that you can break down long form notes into multiple images. So the only part that I kind of have tweaked on that would be the image may not fit in the right size that I want to share on social media. So what may happen is I may end up putting in some spacers and stuff like that to get this first section exported as one image and the second section exported as a second image. A little bit of trial and error, but in general, for kind of shorter form atomic notes, Craft is great for just exporting an image and popping it in and saying, there you go, there is something, and I can elaborate in a tweet or wherever else it may be. For kind of helping with training and stuff like that, I love the ability to also do a PDF or a Word. And people think you've went through lots of effort, and you're like, here you go, here's a PDF version, here's a Word version, here's an online link to it. And if you leave a comment, we can update this, or if you have any thoughts on this note here, oh, brilliant, that must have taken you so long. And you're like, in one sense, it's that kind of little bit of surprise and delight for people, especially if it's some sort of work related stuff that somebody may be paying for something. It's that kind of going above and beyond, and oh, I remember why we work with these people. They do things a little bit better than everybody else. The last thing that I do in Atomic Notes is I use block links so much. So I know I showed you how I use the Genesis and the reference and stuff like that, but block links for me they're so easy, because in the C also there, and especially in tagging, there is the potential to want to categorize everything. And I don't want to categorize everything, because if I say it's categorized as finance, possibilities are endless. If I say it's categorized as how to save for a mortgage, or I say how to, structure employee payrolls, that's way more succinct, and that note can be way more helpful when you're actually looking for it. So what I want to show you is I want to show you a short newsletter that I wrote. And here it is here. It's actually the second, I believe. Yes. So you can see all the underlines obviously are block links. So I didn't write these within the newsletter. I didn't sit there staring at a blank page trying to get inspiration. I wrote lots of random thoughts that I had during the month, and went back to those and reviewed them, and some of them became atomic notes, like technology is replacing teachable jobs. So that is an atomic note, but using the block links, that became its own standalone piece of content and then complemented everything else. So what I would do is I'd go into my atomic notes and I would filter them by date, and I would look at what atomic notes I've actually created over the last month. And I'm looking for patterns, and patterns that complement each other as well. So in this newsletter, I would start up the top and I would say, I want to talk about web safety, replaceable jobs, building a productive business, and the powers of note taking, because that was the themes and kind of phases that I seem to be following that month. So I find when I'm interested in something, I will create multiple atomic notes that month around that subject. And like now, with having new atomic notes just from today, I will have a pattern. So I may in the next newsletter say, here is a number of different ways. Here's how to create atomic notes. Here's why you should create atomic notes, and here's how to share them as well. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, really, really good.
Excellent. Okay, I'll move on to focus drivers quickly. Focus drivers is a little bit different. It's a mindset framework, and it applies beyond craft. It applies anywhere you want to apply it, really. And the idea behind focus drivers is not to get tunnel vision and concentrate on the specific task in front of you, because different tasks have different clients and different deadlines and different nuances. And we get tunnel vision and we go into this. And focus drivers allows you to take a step back and categorize and figure out the type of tasks. And by figuring out the type of tasks, you can then prime yourself for the different type of modes that you're going to get into. So it's based on when you then go to plan your day, you can figure out what your capabilities are that day. Do I actually have high levels of energy today, or am I really run down today? Once you've categorized tasks by energy levels, by focus modes, that will help you to kind of assess each of the tasks and then say, okay, the next 90 minutes, I don't have much energy. I'm going to batch these tasks, which happen to be in eco mode, which require low levels of energy. Or I have lots of energy, but I'm not ready for work stuff. I need to experiment and master my craft. I'm going to go into off-road mode. And what's really nice about using the craft cards here is we have a cover image here, but I've intentionally removed the cover image when you go into an individual page so that we can see the top of the content highlighted. And what that does is that gives me just a quick overview. I can see straight away, focus low, focus high, focus high, focus low. And it's nearly like I have all of these rules for these modes before I even go into each individual one. I can go into individuals if I want to read about the specifics and the recommendations. But in general, I could just use these cards as that kind of bit of guidance for me. And what helps me with these modes is it's not just, I had a problem with deep work and shallow work, and it was all just focus level. It wasn't based on the outcomes. And for me, I realized that I've spent so many time joining numerous courses and learning stuff and reading books and learning and not necessarily applying all those learnings and not actually bringing them into my day-to-day life, whether it be creating them as new habits or monetizing them for work. So by segmenting deep work into off-road and sports mode, that's allowed me to say, okay, this is learning without a dedicated outcome behind. This is learning to master your craft. Whereas I'll go to sports mode. This is learning, or this is execution with a specific outcome in mind. And what it allows me to do is by categorizing all of my kind of tasks, I can go in then, and at the end of the day, when I do a daily review and I use, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly switch to Sunsana. And what I do is I use Sunsana for my daily planning. And when I'm in Sunsana, I have all of my tasks, and you can see I use the same categories: eco mode, off-road, park, sports. And each of the tasks for my day are categorized as sports modes. And you can see today it's sports mode. But if I had been attending this rather than presenting, this would have been in off-road mode, because there would not have been a clear outcome I was just here to experiment mentally and figure things out. But when I decide it's the end of the day and I go to review my day, I can see how much time I spent in sports mode, how much time I spent in eco mode, how much time I spent in park mode. And that fits into everything that I do. So I can then also apply that within craft to say, well, the work I'm actually doing now, is that related to sports mode or eco mode? And it kind of dictates then my flow. And it means you can stack multiple tasks together in the same mode, because I find the kind of the deep work theory of 90 minutes of flow is great, but the practice is I have to get something done. I have 15 minutes. I'm really busy, but this is really important. I have to get 15 minutes of this done, and then I have to move on to the next thing that's just as important. So by having these focus modes, also it allows you to batch the tasks together under one mode, instead of just batching all email as all email and all phone calls as all phone calls. You're batching it as what's the outcome. So for example, I may ring my friend just as a catch up to recharge and refresh and say, what are we doing this weekend? Well, that task is in park mode because I know I'm mentally switching off. I have no outcome from this. I don't need any specific energy level. Likewise, if I was ringing a client to say, well, let's discuss this project we're planning, I may need to be in sports mode. So I need to be primed and ready for this. Both phone calls could take 15 minutes, but they need totally different focus levels. So it kind of allows more longevity as well. Instead of next week's tasks kind of dictating your flow and what you do, you're putting them into specific segments to say, okay, I have a busy week, but I have lots of sports mode stuff I have to do on Tuesday. How can I prepare Tuesday morning? I'm going to go for a swim Tuesday morning, or I'm going to be fresh when I get into this. And it takes away that uncertainty and the variance of those specific tasks, because you're just in sports mode and you have a timer or whatever suits you for that, 30 to 90 minutes to do that mode. And then you're out of that mode. So there's not the same emotional attachment to not completing something, that when you don't get a task done, you have that kind of Zeigarnik effect of not completing something. But for me, I've completed a 90-minute session of sports mode. That's good for me. That's positive. Even if I didn't get all of the work completed, I actually done 90 minutes of it. And then eco mode is kind of straightforward. It's autopilot tasks. It's tasks that you could do while juggling anything else. But the most important thing about eco mode versus kind of anything else that's a deep flow state is it allows you to be open to interruptions. It opens those floodgates, because we all tend to plan with best case scenario rather than worst case scenario. And by leaving room for that uncertainty and the unknown, you don't then be in the middle of something and you get a phone call and you go, oh shit, I have to answer this, you're breaking my day. So it gives you permission when you're in sports mode and off-road mode to say, no, I'm not talking to anybody for 90 minutes because I will be available after that 90-minute session. I'm now in a 90-minute eco session. Feel free to interrupt me. That is perfectly fine. I can juggle. I can chat to you while I'm sending emails or filling in some forms or whatever the case may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I love this from the moment you first described it to me, particularly because it kind of gives you that. It's almost very realistic. Like, you've only got a limited amount of energy today, and you can't spend the whole day in sports mode. So how are you going to dissect and divide the rest of it? And I really like that kind of realistic element to it as well.
Yeah, for me, it's important that kind of honesty. I think we all do it, and we all stack up unrealistic amount of tasks in our day. And for me, that feeling of not accomplishing something because you only got 5 tasks out of the 20 that were already unrealistic to ever get done, rather than now I look back and I say, I got 2 sessions of sports mode done today. And that's really productive. I think for anybody to have an 8-hour day and to get 3 hours of deep focus done, that for me is phenomenal. There's so many days before I use this that you would get pushed through the day by your tasks and just in that kind of reactive way rather than controlling. But also inoculates procrastination. I mean, I've spent so much time going off-road, learning stuff when I should have actually been in sports mode, delivering stuff as well.
True, love that. We've got a question from Bruce, and just a reminder for anyone listening in, throw your questions in now, because we're going to wrap up in the next few minutes or so. So Bruce says, I can see possible forks so often while accumulating material for other notes that many get lost as possible paths to take in future. Do you have any particular, do you have any such issue for you, and how do you deal with it if so?
So we're talking about forks in the road with
I think
atomic
so,
notes.
like, I think more related to atomic notes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, I don't actually. I suppose I'm a little bit forgiving when it comes to atomic notes, in the sense that I'm not aiming for everything is findable all the time. I'm aiming for it's a second brain. It is not a all-knowing brain. The first brain is not all-knowing. So if there is a fork in the road, what's beautiful about atomic notes is you can take both directions. You don't have to go down one. So an atomic note is your opinion or your viewpoint or your perspective on something. But as humans, we can have multiple perspectives. So it's a good way to actually set up two documents and argue both pros and cons, or argue both the left and right forks as well.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
then that's where the C also would actually come into this. That's where that would be beneficial. You may have the counter argument in here beside this.
Yeah, just let us know if that answers your question, Bruce. But it does make me think of something too, or at least, you know, I know that you're creating quite a lot of content. I think you've got a blog, right? And you've got some notes in your blog too, which is like even shorter pieces of content. Obviously, you're coming up with these atomic notes, which are both for yourself and potentially to be shared in future. Do you set yourself any criteria for how much you should create, or is it more or less you're just creating and you just see what you come up with? Do you have any criteria for how much to create?
Sometimes you'll have, sometimes you will. So let's say if you said, I'm going to write a blog post. Well, yes, you're going to have to deliver a blog post, or you're going to send out an email and newsletter. You know, it's not, I'm not trying to do the bottom up kind of, you know, everything will magically bubble to the surface. I do think there has to be set projects and deliverables in place to influence those atomic notes and to kind of push you forward. So I do have, inside my areas, I do have a writing inbox full of different notes for education, for personal development, and, you know, atomic, which are notes that are kind of mid-process, that they haven't been finished. So you can see I've tagged it with an idea for budding. So I come back to these infrequently, but what I would do is, if I did have some sort of deliverable with a deadline, would be, you know, like a blog, it would be the going back through what atomic notes do I already have for this blog post, what snippets do I already have, what external stuff. And I suppose what that would do is that would steer my interests for the coming week. So let's say, for example, I was writing a blog on reoccurring revenue for businesses. I would put in, you know, what questions do people want to know? And if I have these already answered, okay. But if there may be 2 or 3 bullet points in there that, you know, I just don't know the answer to this question. So that would then mean in my kind of more relaxed time, I may decide, well, that's what I'm going to do when I'm sitting in the doctor's waiting room, or when I'm collecting somebody, or whatever it may be. Out with my phone, have a look through something, maybe save it to Instapaper, or review what I have already in there. But instead of just randomly consuming content just for the sake of consuming content, I already have in the back of my mind projects I'm working on, the deliverables I already have to steer towards. But as for, there's no set number of how many atomic notes I'm aiming to create. They're, you know, atomic notes for me are very much, they're organic and they're more beneficial as they grow. But I didn't know till a week ago I'd be sharing this with you. I didn't decide till yesterday that I would create some atomic notes based on this instead of having random notes. But I think that for me is the one thing that people should take away with atomic notes is it's not a set process to sit down and say, today I'm going to make an atomic note. It should be in the back of your mind to say, could that be an atomic note with everything? I'm doing, I do web design, so I'm doing an accessibility report for an education website at the moment. That will become an atomic note on certain parts of that accessibility. But what that will do is, because the reason it will become an atomic note is I will have to make a recommendation to the client, but explain why they need these certain things for accessibility. And that one, why you need to have screen reader, why you need to have a skip content link at the top of the page. Well, I will then make that an atomic note. And that may become a blog 101 on accessibility for websites later on. And it may become a checklist later on as well. So there's just so many possibilities that what you can do with them. But definitely just learning for the sake of learning, you know, that for me, that doesn't work. You know, I say here, apply an output and action orientated mindset. Research with specific projects in mind that you can apply your efforts to now. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not just chasing what I love. It's not, you know, excitement and passion. Sometimes you have to do stuff. Sometimes you have to tick a box and move on quickly for stuff as well. So that for me is the important part. It's kind of preempting that and setting guidance out.
Awesome. Cool. I think that's pretty much the end. We'll just hit time. So thanks so much, Dave, and also JF and Martin for presenting your crafts today. And yeah, just a reminder for everyone listening in, this kind of event will be happening every couple of weeks. But if you have feedback, if you've got ideas, if you've got things you'd love to see, or if you've got something you'd love to share yourself, please reach out to me. Let me know. You know, we're really open to kind of collaborate with you and build what we can in any way to kind of make useful, cool ideas spread even further. So thanks for listening in. Enjoy the rest of your days and weeks, and we'll catch up soon.